or episodic television and American television looks smoother than a Mexican novella, which looks very sharp.
Mexican novellas, they tend to like soap operas with broad, flat lighting, so they don't have to relight because they shoot every day, and the scenes change every day, and the sets change around every day, and the positions of the actors change around every day. So you don't get really good feature type lighting in those things because they don't take time to relight. Once they light the set, that's it.
Yeah, it's very video looking, where everything is in sharp focus.
So it may have to do with the cameras that they're using. They're using 3-chip cameras.
Yeah. Could be. So when I looked at what Alex and Javier were doing yesterday with that camera, now I'm looking on a standard 1080 screen here. It looked, everything was sharp and in focus, but I don't know, there was something about it that just looked too realistic, if there's such a thing.
Yeah. I was watching the YouTube feed in 4K from the NAB floor show, the show floor, and it was being upscaled, I believe, 1080p input, but it looked good. It had, good brightness. It wasn't high HDR, I don't believe.
Right there, Preto. Best of show.
Really? A charging case?
Which best of show?
There were something that already exists?
Nope, didn't exist before this show.
No, the wirelesses did, but the case did.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Good to have you with us today. If you're watching on YouTube, you can always find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is a general look at production and IT-related topics where we answer your questions. So please get your questions in if you have anything. Obviously, we are all this week concentrating on what's happening at the National Association of Broadcasters show in Las Vegas. Second hour, we typically have a deeper dive into a topic. Today is audio day, typically, but it's also our third day of NAB, looking at NAB. We're not doing floor coverage. We're not going remotely out to the show floor as we did the last 2 days, but we will be definitely discussing what's been presented there, what people are seeing online is coming out of NAB. So if you have questions about any of those things, this is a great day for them. Submit your questions. And as always, don't just submit them, but vote them up. Let us know what you're most interested in learning about or having the panel talk about. We have an august panel of people who have all sorts of credentials in the production area. And I just wanted to take one moment to thank our field teams. Man, what a fabulous yeoman's job of going through NAB, through the halls, and bringing us kind of an NAB experience virtually. Javier Alfaro, Felipe Baez, George Kennedy, Jeffrey Powers, TJ Heidemann, Guy Cochran. I hope I'm not leaving anybody else out. I may be. Oh, Alex was there at the tail, not on the main show, but he actually was there at the tail end in after hours. And for those of you who don't know about After Hours, that is our 24/7 service that kind of runs behind the scenes and is always open for people asking questions about stuff. So there was not only all the coverage we did from the show floor here on the main show, there was a ton of stuff done in After Hours, ton of discussions, and even more wandering around the show there. So today, audio day, so entertaining your audio questions, but also your general production questions. All right, I've been talking too much. Let's go. Courtney, what is our first question of the day?
Oh, thank you, Bill. Let me talk some more to you. Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida has a question. He says, is the NAB team planning to visit the Telestream booth? Curious about the Zoom Wirecast development.
This one of the things I was not surprised that the teams who were there covering the show would kind of be in one area. We had 2 or sometimes 3 teams working the show. And once they were in an area, when you look around NAB, it is so visually rich. You go, oh, I want to see that, and I want to see that, and you might have been planning on spending a half an hour there. But it's really easy to wake up, 3 hours later after you arrive in that. I haven't gone anywhere, and it's lunchtime. There's just a lot of targets of opportunity. So I'm sure we didn't get, I know for a fact we didn't get to everything that I wanted to see. We didn't get to everything that everyone on the panel here wanted to see. We did as much as we could, and some things were probably left out. But that's just the way NAB is. I've gone to whole shows for all 4 days in the old days, starting on Monday and going through the tail end on Thursday, and had only 40 or 50% of my go see list taken care of. Courtney, what are your thoughts?
What you might do is pop over into after hours and check with Greg there to have them ping them if they haven't left the show yet. And I think they are still there putting together some video packages to release as YouTube shorts later on that are going to be edited and produced to be posted there. So pop over in after hours and inquire there if they still have communication with the floor crews and if they're still producing some more videos that'll be on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's a perfect suggestion. So yeah, it may be sort of over in terms of our live inserts every day, but it's not over in terms of a lot of people there who might be able to help you out. Let's go on to the next question.
All right. Next up from Steve Uroff in Madison, Wisconsin. He says, what was the primary transport tech for last night's HDR live view broadcast test? Bonded cellular, venue Wi-Fi, a combination? I didn't observe a single compromise in a very high bandwidth stream.
Yes, we were using the LiveView LU800s, which bond 8 cellular devices, 2 Wi-Fis, and also have an Ethernet port. That's the unit we were using. LiveView was very nice to provide us with I think they provided us with one, and Jeff Keithley might have had one. I don't know, but we were using 2 LiveView 800s, and they did really yeoman service there. I will also say that NAB is one of the most difficult environments traditionally to get any kind of RF or cellular signal out of. There were 65,000 or so people. At the height of NAB, it was 140, 150,000 people. And it's just so congested in terms of RF, particularly with all the people demoing stuff on the show floor as well, and so much international news coverage instance that it's a hard place to do wireless. And the fact that the HDR live view broadcast, you're talking about specifically the HDR live view broadcast test. I was thinking about the regular 800Us, but I think it was one of those 800Us that did the HDR test that Alex conducted kind of after the main broadcast show was over. I watched part of that, and it looked good. It looked like we got a very good HDR signal out of there, but it is bonded cellular with Wi-Fi backup, so I don't know exactly which pathway they were using, but I think that's what was happening. Let's sneak off to the next question.
Okay, next up is from Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida. He says, are there any interesting new offerings from New Tech?
Chris is going to help us out. Yeah, Chris Fenwick.
Yeah, I swung by the New Tech booth, and they have a new TriCaster Pro, they call it. And it's actually a Ross switcher with a TriCaster sticker on it. So it's guaranteed to be more reliable and crash much less.
Nice. All right. New Tech's been around a long time. Yeah, that's just, boy, I remember being at NAB when Play, the original New Tech company, said, we've got this thing. And
John says it's called the Quadcaster.
The Quadcaster. Oh, now why is that, John?
It's more than try.
Quad.
There you go. Yeah, it's better than
one more.
Quadcaster.
It's one more than a TriCaster.
And we'll go to the Pentacaster and the.
No, I mean, I will say honestly, a lot of gear just gets a bad reputation. You know, the OBS on the Macintosh. Everybody says you can't use OBS on a Mac. My picture goes through OBS on a Mac every single day. I use it all the time so that I can switch between my screens and whatnot. So some stuff is just fun to poke holes at and poke fun of. But yeah, the TriCaster.
You know, I actually think you're bringing up a larger problem that we have, and I've seen this over and over again, which is on the net early, somebody would pop up and go, yeah, I had trouble having to do this. I don't think it does this very well. And the next thing you know, there's a thread about it, and people are saying, does it really not do this very well? And then it just starts spreading and spreading. And suddenly a piece of gear gets a reputation for not being a good piece of gear, when in fact, it is a good piece of gear. It just has...
Or it does some things well, but you tried to make it do something it wasn't designed to do.
Absolutely.
And the problem is actually worse than that, Bill, because what happens is, let's take a sandwich. Somebody says, I went to the sandwich shop. The bread was stale. And then somebody else says, yes, and the pickles were soggy. And then all of a sudden, the thread splinters, and it becomes a discussion on the best way to grow, slice, and serve pickles.
That's right. How much garlic is in your pickle? It's way too much
people
garlic.
Are horrible at communicating. They're horrible at communicating. And so often somebody will ask a question and then the answer goes bloop, off the other direction. And the interviewers need to be better at saying, that's all very interesting, but can you answer my actual question?
Yeah.
You know, and people are afraid to do that because, you know, we're worried about, I don't want to offend this guy. It's like, no, you have a job. This is your job, is to manage this conversation.
Yeah. I also think there's another factor at work, and I've noticed this on a lot of subjects, not just tech things, but a new thing comes out and a bunch of people love it. So everybody starts going, yeah, they try it. It is a good product. It starts building this mass of people who say, this thing is really good. This thing is really good. Well, if everybody is saying it's really good, how do you stand out? But it has a flaw. It's not, everybody's saying it's good, but look I figured out it's got this thing that doesn't work right. And you can kind of separate yourself. And I think a lot of people like to do that. Let me tell you
that's
how
a possibility.
Fails.
The other problem is what I call buyer bias. I just spent all this money on something, and I don't want to admit that I made a bad purchase.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to talk about the stuff that I like.
Yeah. Courtney, you have thoughts on it?
Yeah, that's why there's bug bounties out there for people to find bugs in the new equipment, you know, because, hey, the sooner they find them, the sooner they can squash them. One thing I want to know is, Chris, is Kiki Stockhammer still in there giving the demos?
Speaking of play.
I actually didn't go to the new tech.
I
don't know if you noticed this, but there actually isn't a TriCaster Pro, and they did not actually. I was lying. That everything was lying, and I apologize.
Well, they used to have a little like a small car, like a mini SUV, parked out in front of the South Hall all the time, with the TriCaster in as their mobile video gathering a field unit. And I was wondering if, since the South Hall wasn't open anymore, I wonder if they still had that showing it. And I wonder how they're doing pushing NDI, because they're making a lot of progress through a lot of other manufacturers out there to incorporate NDI, especially the PTZ areas and so on. So I'm wondering
we
if
sure
that
hear it
was
talked
featured.
about here on the show a ton. It seems like one of the biggest enabling technologies out there. And we mentioned Kiki Stockhammer. There's a thing about booth presentation. I don't think it's as prevalent as it used to be, but you'd find a really polished, wonderful presenter, and Kiki was one of those. And they attract their own group there. We used to see the demo people, and boy, I used to think that the young men and young women, they typically tend to be young, somewhere under 40, and they're very polished and very presentable, and they really draw your eye. And I always thought, these are probably being sourced from somewhere, and yet they're being given a slot where they have to present very technical stuff. So they probably, like actors and actresses, had to memorize these long scripts. You know, I'm the demo person for the brand new Sony, blah, 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 blah. It is very technical. They usually had a big script. They might be on a stage with even inside the Sony booth, 20 or 30 chairs, and they had to present this information over and over and over. booth demoing is its own art. And boy, I stand in awe of some of the people who do it really, really well.
I worked very closely with Kiki for about 4 years. We toured all over the US and Europe doing 6 or 7 shows a year. And Kiki is otherworldly smart. She's super bright. She
doesn't surprise me at all.
Wasn't she one of the original owners of Play, or wasn't she involved in the company?
Yeah,
somewhere?
she was one of the original. I don't know that she was an owner. I think she probably was, but she was definitely one of the first 6 people or something like that. And of course, you know, she was, you know, the Kiki wipe of the video toaster, you know.
Right, that's right. Yeah, the leg wipe.
And she got started in her, I think, in her early 20s. But not only is she an amazing demo artist, can think on her feet like nobody's business. We used to do a thing where we would I'm only vamping here because we have no questions. We used to do a thing on the last day of NAB where we would slip her a list of 10 absurd words to work into her demo.
Really?
And we were like, you know, keyword bingo. And then there was another time where we were doing a demo where she was demoing the Play product, the TriCaster, I think, or no, not TriCaster, but Trinity, it was called. She was demoing that, and I was switching a show using it. And this is why I don't believe demos ever. She would be demoing, and I could watch on the screen and see that her demo was crashing, that her machine was crashing. I would then cut off of her screen and go to my computer and continue to do her demo for her while she was rebooting her machine live on stage. When her machine was back up, I would switch back to her, and we just had little eye signals like, hey, I could use a little help here. You know, because I was actually sitting in the audience, not backstage, switching the show. That's why I never believe demos. It's
the show must go on thing. You got a bunch of people there. They want the information saying it's crashed. Everybody has to sit and twiddle their thumbs, make a phone call.
It was an honor to work with her. She's super smart.
There are some really good people. I remember Tim Wilson was a friend of mine, and he used to do demos for, who was it? Was it Adobe or Avid? Anyway, Tim was in that same category. Just a fine demo artist. And I got to know him well enough to know that he put in hundreds of hours in front of every one of those NAB stretches where he had to demo it. So I'm just giving out a salute to the really dedicated demo artists who put this information out at places like NAB, some of whom are, as Chris has indicated about Ms. Stockhammer, great technologists on their own. Others are hired guns who come in to present highly technical information in a very listenable and watchable format. They're all amazing in my book. All right, we've pushed this around for a while. Let's go on to the next question.
Next one coming in from Andrew Cheney out in Wales. It says, Cheney from Wales, UK here. We are a longtime user of Blackmagic design devices from the original TV studio onwards. The ATM SDI Extreme ISO has a noticeable high-frequency hum on mic 1 and 2 inputs when connecting a mini jack to XLR input. Has anyone noticed?
Courtney, do you want to start us off, and Chris will help?
I don't have the SDI input one, and it depends on what kind of signal you're feeding into that XLR input. Are you feeding a dynamic microphone? If so, you got to crank the level up almost all the way, and you're going to hear probably a lot of high frequency hum. And with SDI inputs, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some crosstalk between any of those SDI buses and the audio. So I don't know what your solution is. Make sure that your cable, your mini plug to XLR is wired correctly. And so you're trying to wedge a balanced line over that XLR into an unbalanced stereo input. If you have that in line input, set the line input on the ATEM. So you might go in and make sure that the shield on the XLRs is connected to the right pin.
Chris?
To unbalance that.
I'm sorry. I thought you were done, Courtney.
Sorry.
My bad.
I was just waning.
That's all right. Chris Fenwick.
Yeah, Cheney, I think what Courtney alluded to is, we're so used to doing so much stuff with analog that the problem you're talking about sounds like a bad cable, power next to your audio. It could be a lot of analog problems. I think as more and more things go digital, we forget our analog troubleshooting techniques. I will say this also, name drop moment here. I got to chat with Grant Petty at the show, and I basically, all I wanted to do is thank him for all the work that they do to do their live, their demos, when he does new product announcements. And he was super fun to chat with. He's like, oh yeah, those are really hard. I go, you should do more of them. And he says, well, I can't. I still have to run the company, and they take me a lot of time. He also kind of admitted to the fact that when they are, this is kind of off record, but when they're producing those videos, like he says, it's really chaotic because we make the products, we don't necessarily use them, and so it's kind of chaos when they're putting those shows together. But he had just been talking to somebody else and admitted that sometimes you can run 100 or 1,000 of something and just one of them's bad. So ask around, see if other people have the same problem. Do your analog testing, troubleshooting, and it might be that you just have a bad unit that you have to contact your dealer or whatever.
You mean Grant Petty isn't spending 6 hours a day cutting on an ATEM ISO? I'm shocked.
No, but he did allude to the fact that he spends an awful lot. He says he takes tons of time to do those. He admitted that on the floor behind him was absolute chaos. There's cables and you're stepping on things, and he
looks
has
so
all these,
neat and organized.
He has all these little clips on the back edge of the counter where he clips and color codes all the cables that he's supposed to pull out. And he says he rehearses them at home, the steps he wants to do. And I told him, I said, yeah, but what percentage of CEOs, billionaires, can do that stuff, live unplugging drive. And I just told him, I said, it's super impressive. And I love it. And he was super he seemed to be, maybe it's just an acting, super thankful, for the response. I think a lot of times when you show up at an event like that, it's like, oh, I want, and literally the guy who was talking to him for me, he had brought in his thing. He goes, yeah, this thing's not working. And he's like, go talk to that guy. I'm just the CEO.
Grant will do your tech support too if you show up with a bad camera. Courtney, more thoughts?
Yeah, you might try grounding the shield on the connector to the case of the ATEM. That might work. And also, if you can find some clip-on ferrite cores, those little ferrite beads, not beads, but usually they're barrel shaped that you can clip over a cable. Clip that over your power cables, because a lot of times switching power supplies, and I would think that the power supply that comes with the ATEM would be filtered, have one of these on it. So put one of those over the DC input cable that plugs the power into the ATEM, because sometimes high frequency from those switching power supplies can leak in, and that ferrite barrel will help filter out some of that high frequency noise. But your problem is probably the wiring and that adapter cable. If it wasn't designed to work with the ATEM, maybe it's not wired correctly.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I was just rereading the question to make sure that we'd come as close as we could. And so high frequency and hum often don't go together. So it's a question as to what it is. I think everybody's been talking about things that are my suspicion too, some sort of inducted noise that's getting into that unbalanced mini pin audio input. And we're a little surprised about the fact that they just use those 3.5 millimeter unbalanced jacks for a thing that was production kind of oriented, but I guess it's just a matter of the real estate they had available on the back of the unit for plugging audio in. But it's unbalanced, and unbalanced audio is always a potential for getting noise and other stuff. Marty, you have a final comment before we move on?
Yeah, I completely agree with all the advice here. When you're interfacing, again, we don't know what you're plugging in, right? So whether it's a microphone or a mixer, but either way, the XLR is a balanced output. So, and the 3.5 millimeter is an unbalanced input in stereo. So plus, minus, and ground on one end, left, right, and ground on the other end. make sure that that the 3.5 millimeter is wired first for stereo and not for balanced. Also, the high frequency hum could be because the wire is on your desk near a power supply that can be radiating, and that'll be picking up. So just look at your wiring, make sure that your pinouts are correct, and if you're not real familiar with what the pinouts are, then come hop onto after hours with some specific information. You can show us what you have. We can talk you through it.
Yeah, and last but not least, if you're converting an unbalanced signal, which you might be doing with the XLR input, to an unbalanced, make that as short as possible, because the longer the cable on the unbalanced leg of that, the more it acts like an antenna for picking up noise. So keep things as short as possible if they're not balanced. All right, let's move on. That was fun.
Yeah, and also remember, if it's unbalanced going into the XLR, it's unbalanced all the way down that XLR cable as well,
Absolutely
unless you're
correct.
going into a transformer to go to unbalanced at the end of the converter to the mini plug. Next question comes in from Mike Potter in Hanover, Germany. He says, does the RødeCaster have an inbuilt receiver for the Rode Wireless Go system recently activated by a firmware update? Does the same hold true for the new Rode Pro X, the mini one?
Chris, have you been looking into this?
A little bit. I think it's important to remember that the firmware update is on the Rode Go, and I don't think that there's anything that you could do to upgrade the firmware on the Rode Go for it to magically reach into the RødeCaster Pro X, whatever it's called. And I tell you, they got a bunch of these things. But I will tell you this, that in regards to the wireless Go, this is my pick of the show. This is best of show. They have this little charger case now. You plug the receiver and the two mics in it, and the case alone, it works kind of like your AirPods. The case alone can charge these things 3 times throughout the day.
That's very useful. And you're right. That reminds me of
I don't
AirPods.
know if the RødeCaster has the ability to receive the wireless Go. Also, because I actually have the wireless Go, so I'm a little excited about it. Buy the Thunderbolt cable that they have for it, because you could take the receiver and plug it right into your phone, and you don't even have to use a fancy camera. You can just use the iPhone camera. And as long as you hit all the right buttons on the receiver, it'll put each mic in a channel. So you get your 2 people isolated on their own channel. I mean, obviously, you're going to have to do a little post on it because it sounds silly. But super cool. Fully
Courtney?
digital.
Oh, sorry. Courtney?
Yeah, I think that Rode Central software has to be run to do that. And I think there is an update to the RødeCaster Pro. And I think what they're doing here, because both of those mics are 2.4 gigahertz, which is the same area as Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, as you know, the same frequency band. And the radios for the Bluetooth that's built into the RødeCaster Pro already tunes that, and there's already a 2.4 gigahertz antenna in there. So they probably just reprogrammed it to use either they reprogrammed the wireless Goes to transmit over Bluetooth's frequency and use the Bluetooth protocol, or they just had it changed to their Wi-Fi protocol in the RødeCaster Pro, or the Bluetooth radio has been switched to wireless reception for the RødeCaster Go. And by the way, the DJI always came with one of those cases, Chris. You don't have to pay extra for it.
So here's the deal,
charges.
I did find the sentence in the RødeCaster 2 wireless microphone connectivity paragraph, including the wireless Go 2. So I was totally wrong, but still, the case. It's totally cool.
All right, we're moving on to the next question.
Okay, from Auckland, New Zealand, Peter Moore asks, any recommendations for a company that does custom logos or colors, et cetera, for mic windshields? Where are there companies at the NAB offering this? A cursory search comes up with this so you can know what my question is asking, and he has a link in there.
Yeah, there's lots of them. But Marty, take us through some.
Well, I can't give you any specific manufacturers that are at the NAB show, but I did a search for windscreen microphone printing and came up with a whole bunch of companies that will do this for you. Some of them are in the US, many of them. This seems to be very popular in Europe for news organizations, much more than in the US. But they are out there and they're pretty easy to find.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did a quick search on Google. The term you're looking for is mic flags. So just pop mic flags into Google. You'll find tons of vendors for them. I used to get most of mine from Marker Tech, but apparently this is a big cottage industry out there, and you can get these turned around. If you want something really custom and really nice, they can be a bit pricey. I was seeing $50 a flag, but they will do color imprint on them and turn them around and ship them to you in a couple of days. If you want something really nice, you can get them for $15-20 pretty much from a lot of vendors out there. Courtney?
Well,
yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marty.
Go ahead, Marty.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say a mic flag is typically something that would be a plastic box or thing that you would slide the microphone into, and that would be positioned underneath the microphone head.
Yeah.
But a windshield, a windscreen is something you would put on, say, a shotgun microphone or a ball microphone. That is, there's a foam screen around it, and those can be colored and printed on as well.
Oh, you're talking about pop filters. All right.
Yeah, the foam thing that's on that 416
in front of me. Yeah. For those of you, I probably can't see it because it's against my shirt. But
it's the same companies that do the mic flags also print do the custom printing on the windshields or make custom printed windshields for a variety of microphones. I've seen. Okay,
my bad. Sorry about that.
Online, what I do want to know is kind of related to this is if you watch the morning news shows, the network news shows, the female hosts on there always have these outrageously bright yellow or orange or red or blue outfits on, and always the color of their lavalier mic always matches their outfit. And I'm wondering, do they have this whole rainbow of colors for the wireless mics for those people that are custom painted and custom colored, or is there some kind of overlay or cap that goes on top?
That'd be interesting. I'd love
Have
to
you
get
seen any of that, Marty? I don't know.
Love to get in the NBC prop shop.
There are microphones that are actually paintable. I think there's a certain kind of paint that you want to use, but they are paintable, but some of them do come in colors, limited range of colors because black.
Oh yes, I've seen them in black, white, and flesh colored, but
and gray. But brighter colors, you'd have to paint the microphones.
What if you could go to the cosmetics counter and look at some of the nail polish? Just do it yourself.
Yeah.
Lots of reds available. Anyway, let's move on to the next question.
All right. Next question comes in from Charbacks, in Hong Kong. Have you guys checked out the YOLOBox Pro, an Android-based 4 HDMI input switcher for live streaming?
Jesse Kester is going to help us out here. Jesse?
I have been keeping an eye on the YOLOBox since it was first announced, and I would really like to get excited about it, but they just have so many little twitchy things about how they present themselves online. So your question is about the 4 HDMI inputs on the YOLOBox Pro. We're going to jump over to their website, and they do have 4 HDMIs, but only 3 are in. 1 is an HDMI out. And it might seem like you made the mistake on understanding that, but their materials are constantly full of errors, their promotional materials. So when they first launched, they said it has 2 USB inputs. The second USB input was only able to be used for power. So they're always doing these little upsells that are not technically not untrue, technically maybe not a lie, but always feel very disingenuous. You can plug in 3 HDMIs, but they're bragging that you can switch up to 8 sources. They have copy premium free features are free. So what does that mean? If the premium features are free, live streamed events 1000K plus? Is that 1,000,000? Is it 1,000? So I want to get behind YOLO Live, but there's this like kind of the odor of amateur carnival barking going on all of their materials.
That's interesting. Courtney.
And Charbax, the person asking the question, is in Hong Kong, so maybe he speaks and reads Chinese better and may be able to read their original instruction manual a lot better than those of us that can't read Chinese. And if you're looking for, there's Aaron Parecki has the yellow box and has done a lot of demos and instructional videos on the use of that product. So maybe he's reviewed that 4 HDMI or 4 input multi-input switcher, which has its built-in monitor and so on. So look on Aaron Parecki's website and see if he's got a review of it. That's a place where I'd look.
Maybe there's not a proper character for 3 pretending to be 4 in the translation. We've all run across this. Is it the translation or is it the actual functions? And who knows?
Well, it's been endemic of the company since pretty much day one of this round everything up.
There you go.
And Jesse, I've found a solution for that. What I've done is I've taken those products that come from China and have been machine translated into English. So it's very bad, almost understandable English. I've taken that copy, OCR'd it with my printer, then drop that text into Chat GPT and type rewrite : and drop the text in, and it writes it in perfect English. It's amazing. It's really understandable, and it cleans up all those crazy, wrong word choices that earlier machine language translation did. So we haven't quite gotten to the new AI generated translations yet.
Well, but it's great to have more tools that'll help us. Let's go on to the next question.
Next one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, Chris, you mentioned that the new TriCaster is a Ross switcher with NewTek branding. I don't see anything on Ross's website. Is this a new partnership between the companies?
Chris?
I'm gonna warn you, Douglas. A lot of times I'm just joking about stuff. It's not real. That was sarcasm. I apologize to anybody who thought what I was saying was a real product. It was not. Just being sarcastic.
Oh. Why is your now with AI badge coming up?
I am now with AI.
Is that Chris GPT? Interesting. All right, let's move on to the next one. Sorry to disappoint you, Douglas.
All right, our friend Paul Wallace down in Austin, Texas, has a question. He says, in what way does Hour One use artificial intelligence to create realistic and expressive synthetic characters for video production? And Hour One is an AI platform at hour1.ai, apparently for generating video from text prompts.
I don't think any of us have a single clue. I have never heard of them, and I'm not seeing any nodding happening on the panel here. It sounds interesting. It also sounds like synthetic characters is a very difficult thing to do. We've been watching the folks who are really good, like the Unreal Engine folks, at doing artificial characters, and we realize how complicated it is to make that actually appear anything close to realistic. Courtney, what do you got to say about this?
I think there's different classes of AI generated video out there, and some of it generate video from scratch, just from a description, the text prompt, like show me a teddy bear walking down the street, and it will generate enough multiple frames. And the current level of image generation from text doesn't quite get that very, very well. And it will, you'll see as the little bear is walking, one of its legs will flip upside down so that the foot is in the hip and the hip is in the foot. And so it doesn't really get it consistently from frame to frame to frame to frame. Now, there are other AI generators that are using avatars, previously created avatars, to map the facial expressions on using descriptions of anger or fear or things like that. So maybe that's what this particular place does. I haven't gone to look at that place yet, but maybe they're using predefined avatars, caricatures, and then applying expressions to them on the fly.
Marty,
or maybe syncing up audio to them as well.
Sorry, Marty.
Yeah, so I'm just browsing through the website here, and it's kind of interesting. You get to choose the humanoid character that you want to use, and it looks like a waist up image. And then based on the text prompts that you put in or the script that you put in, this humanoid thing image speaks your text and appears to do some body language and hand gestures. And I'm seeing a quote from president of NBC Universal talking about the collaboration between Universal, DreamWorks Animation, Cameo, and Hour One, bridging together innovation to do what they're doing. So it's intriguing, I gotta say. Something to try and see how well it works. If you want to do a video like an instructional video or a promotional video, and you don't have a good background or camera or microphone, or don't feel you are adept enough at your on-camera presence, and you want somebody else to do it for you, it might be an interesting thing to try out.
Courtney, your thought?
Yeah, I just thought this would be great for these small market television stations that can't afford news anchors to do a nightly newscast. They can rip the headlines from the Associated Press, feed it into this AI newscaster, and generate their own little newscast every night with very little effort. Even pull some of the videos that they find available on the various press sources. So you could put together a newscast. So all you anchors out there in Palazzula, Mississippi, better be watching out, because they're going to be replaced by an avatar.
This reminds me.
Languages.
Yeah, this reminds me. I was just in a discussion online about there's a thing that was happening. I saw a news story, and here's the thing. A lot of clients in my past have said, I really love this talent. Not only are they extraordinary, but they are a bit ethnically ambiguous. And what they are saying is that maybe the community around them, which may skew one direction. I mean, let's say it's a local or a small regional thing, and there are a lot of people of Asian descent in there, and they want their on-screen talent or their spokesperson to reflect the community around them. So they're happy to find people who are in that category. And in my experience, that made more opportunity for the talent who had those ethnicities to find work, because they were reflecting the community around them. Now we're talking about AI being able to create these avatars. And the thing that I saw yesterday was a little bit of a pushback from some of the ethnic communities and saying, hey, it was really hard for us to find jobs anyway. And now you're saying you can just make an avatar that looks like my ethnicity and send that up. And I'm also not going to get the job as a talent because of that. It's really interesting, all these little sub ripples that are happening because of what is possible in terms of creating artificially crafted presences that, for the best reasons, I want our spokesperson to look like the community that's surrounding them. But boy, all of a sudden they're not getting calls anymore. And it's just one more tiny little fraction of how these changes may be impacting certain workers in the field. It's a fascinating thing we're going to be going through over the next couple of years, next couple of decades. Next question.
Next one comes in from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. He says, I'm enjoying the NAB office hours live coverage. When I have attended the show, I often observe common new tech pushed from many vendors, such as NDI one year. Do we see a common industry tech we think we'll see coming out of the show this year?
Let's start with Courtney. Courtney, what do you think?
I did the one thing I see this year is everybody's now has the little tag with AI. Artificial intelligence is now being applied to all the editing platforms and a lot of the color correction platforms and the speech to text generation. mostly in editing you're seeing this, but you're also going to be seeing it in cameras for calculating, exposure and depth of field, and helping you with your lighting, et cetera, et cetera. I remember in 2017, the buzzword was all 3D. There was 3D camera packages to mount 2 cameras and beam splitters and interocular distance generators and 3D displays and 3D projection and all of that. And then the next year, nobody had 3D. So who knows? Next year, maybe AI will only be a figment of our imagination, but I kind of doubt it.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of weight behind it. Marty, your thoughts?
Well, I noticed quite a bit of new product that will cross-convert between NDI and other platforms such as SDI and Dante. For example, I've seen starting to see NDIs beginning to compete in the multi-channel audio space. We saw a number of new products for Atmos audio monitoring and conversion. So interfaces, computer interfaces that will split out the audio to all your different loudspeakers with different protocols and different types of Atmos. What else do we see? We saw some additional Dante support coming out, and support for Dante video as well. What else do we see? A number of things. We saw a bunch of lower cost wireless microphones come out. We saw a lot of new support, new ways of monitoring for wireless microphone spectrum usage, for ensuring clean audio. The ability for, again, in wireless microphones, to communicate and control transmitters from the receiver end.
Yeah, that feedback loop of being able to determine things like mute status and altering levels remotely, I think that'd be hugely powerful. I can't tell you the number of times I wish I could go change a setting on something on the stage that was attached to someone's belt pack without having to actually run out there and toss up the back of their jacket and say, excuse me, while I rummage around and change this setting on your microphone.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about more about that in about 15 minutes, right?
There you go. That's right. Our second hour, audio things from NAB. So stay tuned for that. Let's get to the next question.
Coming in from Chris Sabato in Albany, Oregon. He says, in the ATEM Mini, could Blackmagic use the 3.5 millimeter as input, as a balanced input? What would be the drawback?
Courtney?
Well, the drawback would be that it's wired for stereo currently if used as a line input. And so you couldn't use it as a balanced input and for a left-right stereo input at the same time easily without some mechanical switching going on inside there. So that would be one problem. And that they're already using that 3.5 millimeter tip ring sleeve input for both stereo left-right input as line level input and as a unbalanced microphone input with bias power for condenser microphones, for electret condenser microphones. So if you have a little small lavalier that's an electret condenser, it can provide enough 5 volts of bias power for that particular electret condenser when you switch it to mic level. And when you switch it between mic and line, it also changes the input level. So having a third way to reconfigure that input to a single balanced line instead of a stereo input might be a little bit problematic. Maybe Marty has a way to do it, or an external box you might be able to do it with.
I think Marty's kind of agreeing with you. Marty, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. No, with everything that they're doing with that input already, the circuitry inside is just not set up for balanced inputs. The best thing you could do, you can get an interface, an external box or adapter that will accept balanced, and it's a balanced to unbalanced converter. And so, one of the other differences is the impedance for these things. So a balanced input has a fairly a high impedance on both of the plus and minus pins. So balance is plus, minus, and ground. Whereas a An unbalanced input is left, right, and ground, and also at a high impedance. So you can change that. You can convert that with a transformer. You can convert that with an active a set of electronics. But one way or another, you would have to use an external device to make that conversion.
Yeah. Courtney, last thought?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to go with that. The easiest way is to get something like a Beach Tech or one of the people that make the boxes to interface to a DSLR that have 2 microphone level inputs that are balanced and even 48-volt phantom. And their output is designed to plug into the mini mic jack on many DSLRs. So then you put it in you put your ATEM in microphone mode and feed it in that way. And that way you could get your higher quality condensers into a box like that, or just use an external mixer. Like there's a lot of mini mixers here. Let's see if I can grab one within reach. Something like this that has multiple inputs and single outputs, and go into the line input in stereo. So just take the output of this into that mini jack with left and right, and at unbalanced line level. Minus 10 dB, and you should be good to go. It'll give you a little more quality if you keep the cable short between the little mixer and the ATEM, and then you can run balanced cables into the mixer.
Let's move on to the next question.
Coming in from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What are the key metrics and methods that TSV Analytics uses to measure and optimize viewer engagement and retention with machine learning?
I'm not familiar with TSV Analytics. I will say that measuring viewer engagement and retention is a science that's been around for a long time. There was tons of that even in the old Nielsen system of doing surveys of people's media watching habits. It is a pretty well understood science at that end of it. Now, machine learning, I would imagine you'll start with those original statistics and just move them kind of into the modern era and have machine learning interpret them. But Courtney, do you have any different thoughts on it?
Well, I think there's several ways that these analytics operate. They look at engagement and how long you click on it and how long you stay with it and how many people bail out after, how long, and how many people stay all the way to the end watching a commercial or something without switching. So you can get all of those metrics back from your viewer as long as they have their privacy settings set on to share that information back up the line. One thing that I did find out, a lady friend of mine said, "Oh, I got this great new job and I work at home and they pay in crypto." And I went, "Uh-oh, red flag." All you have to do is watch commercials, and you get paid. You don't really have to watch them; you just have to have them on and playing. And so this is what they're doing now. There's companies out there that are gaming these TSV Analytics companies out there by paying thousands of people and having them recruit other thousands of people for a little stipend for every commercial they tune in and watch on their. They don't have to watch it, but just play through on their computer. They're not watching it. They're doing something else. So I wouldn't trust too much of that analytics because it is being gamed in a big way. And you can probably buy those clicks and buy that engagement online from these nefarious companies.
I will say at the other end of the spectrum, there are companies that run legitimately controlled focus groups. They'll bring in a group of people and literally put them in a controlled environment and do up to and including eyeball tracking to see where you're looking, whether you're paying attention, whether your eyes are on the changing content, whether you've decided it's time to check your cell phone and see if you have messages in or look at the time, and can track everything that a supposedly engaged audience member might be doing. There's just a variety of levels of measuring what this ephemeral thing is we call engagement. That also has something to do with, you're putting something out there for sale. How many of them are sold before you put your messaging out there, and how many are sold afterwards? That's kind of the simplest form of measuring audience engagement with a sales circumstance. Courtney, you had a last thought before we move on?
Yeah, here's a scary thought. Depending upon, make sure you check your privacy preferences in there, because I wouldn't put it past some of these companies to turn on your camera and your laptop and track your eyeballs to see what you're looking at on the screen while a commercial or a program is playing. So that's certainly doable with AI, and take a look out to make sure that little LED that lights up next to your built-in camera isn't lit up while you're watching your next commercial, because maybe they're tracking you.
I was about to say, that's, as much as we're annoyed by that little yellow light on our, at least Apple laptops, that's exactly what it's designed to show you. Somebody's tapped in and is watching you watching it. Let's move on to the next question.
Next one comes in from Brett Below in Wisconsin, in Appleton, Wisconsin. He says, does the panel have any experience or opinions on the Mackie Big Knob 3x2 studio monitor controller? I'm considering an upgrade for my Scarlett 2i2 and have to have more inputs.
Chris Fenwick.
So, yeah, Brett, the 2i2 is a kind of a dedicated USB interface. The Big Knob, its kind of primary purpose is to switch between different speakers so you can listen to your big speakers or your near field monitors. I just double checked it. It actually does have a USB, which I didn't realize it had. But the Big Knob is pretty old. I mean, I think they've been selling that for like 10 or 15 years. And before I ran off and bought one, I would look at, and I sorry, I don't have any specific suggestions, but I would look for something that's a bit newer technology. There might be some features that you're not really thinking about that might pique your interest or be useful on the near horizon. But the Big Knob is kind of an old product. I don't know that I would seriously consider buying one.
I think I'm in Chris's area here. As a matter of fact, I used to use these Zoom TAC 2s that are kind of in the same shape. It's got one big knob in the center of things. This happens to be a Thunderbolt controller, usually a couple of monitors out for your near field monitors, a couple of XLR ins for microphones, and then some logic circuitry in there so you can determine, I want to handle the level on this set of speakers as opposed to that one. There are quite a few things. And my Universal Audio Apollo Solo has the same kind of idea. One big knob, but then a system that allows you to control a variety of different things. I love the form factor, but they can get very complex. I know my Apollo Solo is very complicated under the hood. Marty, your thoughts about these?
Well, one quick second.
Oh, yeah,
Mickey's just telling me that they actually, about 4 or 5 years ago, they did update the Big Knob to add the USB. The original one didn't actually have USB. Now it does. Not sure exactly how it ties in. So I said it was 10 or 15 years old. It's still 5 years old. I'd still look at what other. It might be the best choice for you, but definitely look at newer things.
Marty, 80s.
Yeah, and just before the show, Mickey was telling me that Avid updated their Matrix Studio monitor controller so to a Matrix 2, and so that might be something to look at, depending on what price point you're looking at.
I will say I think your instinct is good. I love having this one big knob that I can use for a lot of things. It particularly when doing this show, the fact that I can reach out to my Apollo Solo and tap it, a couple of simple things, and change my audio mic level, or if I'm in a session with somebody, change the level of my bridge monitors is really convenient. I do like them. Let's go on to the next question.
This one comes in from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. He says, can we please filter out and or educate questioners which use the term AI, please? If I, as a coder, write a script or a program based on a tech spec I got, it's using known inputs and expected outputs, then it's not AI.
Courtney?
Well, I agree. AI has now become a marketing term. It's like when everybody started putting digital on everything in the sales brochures for stuff that wasn't really, as you can see, Fenwick now with AI on his window there. Yeah. I'd like to think my intelligence is artificial, but unfortunately, it's real.
We've come across this. It's like everybody calls them Kleenexes, even if they're not a Kleenex. These terms come into use, and all of a sudden, everybody starts bandying them around. And now with LAWO, even if that doesn't have anything to do with the product,
if the program or device is making decisions on its own without user input, then it's AI.
Yeah.
If it's programmed to just make a choice, if this, then this, there's a whole product out there called If This, Then That does that specific stuff. It bases its function based on what user input is. But if it's operating without the user input and you're just giving it a direction and it's making all the choices down the line, then I guess it could be considered AI.
Yeah, and then you've got the fine distinction between AI and machine learning, which is a subset of the overall. It just gets very complicated in there. I'm noticing that we don't have a ton of second hour questions, even though we are getting to the top of the hour. So I'm going to keep going with general ones for a minute. We're probably going to lock off additional questions coming in. I do think we want to talk about all the audio stuff from the floor, so I want to allow ample time. We're not going to run way over as we did yesterday, but we'll try to handle as many of your questions as we can. So, Courtney, let's get on to the next one.
Yeah, this one kind of relates to the last question. Jesse Kester from Glendale says, are we seeing any industry progress toward definitions of what now with AI actually means? It's such a broad claim to be nearly entirely meaningless.
Yeah, I think we just discussed that. And I think that's very true. It is the latest and greatest buzzword. And I have to admit, it's kind of earned that. I think we were all absolutely gobsmacked when we saw stuff like Midjourney and suddenly, these fantastic creations that looked like it had taken somebody with tremendous artistic skills to generate. And we learned that anybody can create those by throwing a bunch of words into a text prompt and putting it in their system. Everybody went, wow, this is truly transformative. And in a lot of ways, AI will be truly transformative. But I think the buzz has, like most really transformative technology, the horses on the buzz have gotten way ahead of the horses on the practicality. Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Preto can enlighten us on this. But, the AI that is real AI is usually based on large language model training. And is completely different than what like an algorithmic Google search is, which goes out on the internet. It searches all the same internet information, but Google search returns clips and pointers to articles with actual text that it found with the keywords from your search contained in it. The AI actually divides the entire knowledge base that it has searched or that's in its language model, breaks it up into little syllables, portions of words, not even whole words, 2-letter, 3-letter groups. And it determines what the next word is most likely to be based on statistical analysis of all those little pieces of words out there on the internet. So it is a completely different method and model for generating an answer, and its answers aren't necessarily taken verbatim from anywhere, but it's just creating the words based on the language of choice and in the normal progression of words that are most normally found after another. That's how I interpret it. Maybe John can give me more information on how
Thankfully, John
works.
has raised his hand, so we'll get something from somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about this. John?
Courtney's hired. He did a great job explaining exactly how the transformers work, large language models. So you've got AI's been around for 50 plus years now. We learned neural networks in college in the late 80s. And then they had a thing called AI Winter, where they had theoretical neural networks back starting in the 50s and 60s. And in the 70s and 80s, AI Winter, because they didn't have the horsepower in order to run these neural networks. And so the transformer technology, the breakthrough, came out in a paper in 2017. So it's been out for 5 years. And exactly how Courtney explained it is exactly how they work. They predict the next word based on 175 GPT-4, 175 billion parameters. They're pre-trained on that model, and they're able to predict the next word in the sentence. And that's exactly how the large language models work. The image recognition stuff is a completely different model. So a lot of the stuff now that we're dealing with in production is is AI based upon image digitization of millions of images, which was the AlexNet project back in 2012. All of that stuff have derived from that process. And then the large language models now have been around since for 5 years. But there's some unbelievable stuff coming ahead. So just stay tuned.
Yeah, no, it's a watershed time. Jesse, you asked the question. Any more thoughts on drilling down?
Yeah, I was thinking more from like a legal perspective, how graham crackers need to have graham flour or chocolate candies actually have to be derived from cocoa plants. Are we seeing any movement, any legislative movement toward actually defining what now with AI, now with machine learning means before a company is legally allowed to put it on their marketing materials? Or is that a fool's dream?
Well, someday it may happen. I haven't heard of anybody in Congress being as aware of this stuff. I'm sure there are a few scattered Congress people who understand the potential implications of all this, but I'm not sure if the copyright people are the first one. Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, there are a lot of people right now that are arguing over sentience, whether these AI bots, chatbots, are sentient or conscious. And whether it's, defining sentience and defining consciousness is still argued over. So people really don't know what consciousness is. And so to define something as conscious or a sentient being, to take on its own personality and have its own thoughts and dreams or nightmares, there are nightmares, is another point of discussion. So how you could legally define something as conscious or sentient, that's where the arguments are going to be in court.
I'm not even sure I can determine that for people. I know myself on a Friday night in college, there's probably an argument to be made that I wasn't sentient. Let's move to the next question.
Yeah, trying to define intelligence. Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas says, what is the Live OS production platform from neton.live, and how does it enable live streaming, video conferencing, and remote collaboration?
I've not been on the Live OS platform, and it looks like we might not have anybody here who has had much experience with it. I do know that a lot of people are moving, a lot of companies and a lot of interest in exactly the kinds of things that we explore every day here. And live streaming, obviously, is a massive part of that. We also talk about video conferencing and remote collaboration every single day on Office Hours. Marty, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is kind of interesting. Well, it's a private cloud server that they've named Live OS, so it's their own software, and it enables remote contribution, remote production, collaborative production from various places on the network and off the network over the WAN, and it seems to be compatible with most production protocols such as 2110, NDI, SRT, CDI, which I'm not familiar with, AES 67, Dante SDI, and HDMI. So it can transport all of those different protocols and for either live production or collaborative editing. So it's I think we're seeing an era of a lot of development around cloud production. We all know that, and remote production and remote and collaborative editing and putting together a show from various places. So we here on Office Hours, we do a remote collaborative live television production every day using tools that we are off the shelf, like Zoom, and tools that we have developed ourselves using products such as Isadora and Zoom OSC and Zoom ISO. And there are other platforms such as products such as Live OS that can do some of the same things and maybe some different things.
John Preto.
Live is hard, and producing scalable live solutions is hard. And this is the reason why you're starting to see some of the other vendors that had their own proprietary WebRTC solutions now switch over to Zoom, because Zoom has spent billions and billions of dollars building their infrastructure out. And now these these other manufacturers can leverage that infrastructure because it's all about scalability and reliability. So anytime I see a proprietary solution like this, I don't think they compete against Zoom's infrastructure.
Yeah, my first questions would be, what's their business model and how are they making money to support it? Is it an angel investor somewhere who's tossed? Because there's just huge amounts of money that you would have to do to be able to compete with a Zoom, or Microsoft has kind of got their thing, and there are other organizations that have tremendous financial resources together. So, and I'm not saying that whoever's behind LiveOS or NetOnLive don't have those kind of resources. Maybe they found those people who think that this is the next big thing and are willing to risk their capital to build it out. But I'd be interesting that, when I see something that's trying to play big like this, I always think, what's your financial structure behind the scenes? Do you have enough to build your audience and make it? Does it look like a viable going concern? I have no idea for this. Competition is always good. Maybe they've come up with a feature that everybody else eventually ends up at adopting, and it really helps everyone. Let's go to the next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, he says John Mayer is touring with the classic Gamble EX56 console, formerly from the Grateful Dead, as front of house mixer. If the vendor no longer makes or supports your product, how do you keep something that old running in a show critical position?
You got to find the guy who knows how to fix it. Chris Fenwick.
So Douglas, Gamble only made about 100 of those, and I get the allure of buying, like John Mayer, whatever his name is. He just thought, oh, I could use the Grateful Dead's mixer, and that's why he's using it. I was buying a large console about 20 years ago, and the guy selling me the console, he goes, "If you want, I'll sell you this one." And I almost bought the desk that U2 toured with, doing their zoo tour for 2 years, and it was like really tempting. But you know what? It was an old desk. It was going to be harder to fix. It was really heavy. It was like 400 pounds. And I wised up and I didn't buy it. But in today's day and age, a lot of us like to say, "Well, I'm an audio engineer," and we say that because I can push these faders around and I can, mix something. Back in the old days, engineers were like really engineers, and you would oftentimes see somebody like, lifting the thing or pulling cards. And I think that hopefully John Mayer has somebody who's a real engineer. You probably have somebody on your crew at that level who really can fix things, because you are on the road, and it's not like you can just swing by Guitar Center and get a new cable. That's not the way they play at that level. So hopefully he has a experienced engineer on his crew. Otherwise, wait, this is a 56 input console? I heard that the most recent John Mayer shows are just little acoustic sets. Maybe he just moves down to the next 2 channels if his mic and guitar don't sound good.
He has a Mackie for that, little Mackie 8 channel.
Maybe he only needs 2 or 3 channels on the thing. I wouldn't buy, especially something that the Grateful Dead was using. Yeah.
You never know what's inside
you
the
could
console.
pick them up for about, I saw one online for $7,000 though. Gamble 56.
Yeah, here it is.
EX56.
Looks like this.
Yeah.
It can be yours for $7,000.
There you go.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Oh, sorry. These are old analog consoles, and I worked at a recording studio that just closed its doors last year after COVID, and we had an analog console just like that Gamble 56, EX56. We kept going for doing commercial recording because they liked the way it sounded. It's all analog. It has transformer inputs. It has, the best op amps available in 1975 for its mixing, for its voltage controlled amplifiers, if they even used that. A lot of the times the audio would pass through the fader itself, so you got to keep your faders clean. These days the faders are really just optical encoders that just turn out a number into a DSP, digital signal processor, that controls all the mixing. But it takes somebody with a lot of tender loving care, who knows the circuitry, who's not afraid to switch out all the capacitors when they all dry out and go bad, and to clean all those old patch panels that you had to plug all the patches in, and they'd get dirty, and you'd find out, why does that sound so crunchy on the guitar amp? Oh, wait, let me twist the patch panel. Oh, yeah, there, it's just a dirty connector in the patch panel.
So we're getting pretty close to me wanting to do the switch over, because we are getting some audio at NAB questions in there, and we've already run a good little bit past. So let's do a couple more of these, knock them out, and then head over to the audio at NAB discussion. So go ahead, Courtney.
Okay, another one from Douglas Carmichael says, NAB announced attendance was up 20% to 65,013 at the 2023 show. Do you think the pendulum is swinging back to in-person events?
A bit. It's not. Remember, there used to be 150,000 people at NAB, so 60,000 is bigger than last year. And obviously, coming off the pandemic, nobody wanted to go to trade shows. Nobody wanted to be in a giant hall with a gazillion people breathing on you. It just wasn't part of the pandemic mindset. Now that we're a bit beyond that, and most people feel like that in their life is integrated the way they want to, and they can keep safe and healthy, I think it's going to swing back. But it's also, I was just trying to think. I was sitting here looking at Chris, and Chris and I have known each other for a long time, and we've known each other at trade shows, but I think we met online before we actually were at an NAB working together. And I'm trying to think through the list of my industry contacts and how many of them I've actually picked up in real life at a trade show versus how many now are from these various networky kind of things online. The Mac people who were doing Final Cut would get together. I'd know them. And then I'd run across Chris in real life at a trade show. I think that's where we first physically sat in the same room together. But that's the process now. It's not like the old days when you couldn't meet somebody in your industry unless you went to a trade show and talk to them face to face. And I don't know if that's ever completely coming back. So I don't know if it'll ever reach what it used to be. Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, a good measure of how well it's going to come back is to see how many vendors have disappeared. I noticed by looking at the maps, and I've been attending NAB for 40 years, that it's a much smaller footprint this year than it has been in the past or pre-pandemic. So I think, and it's very expensive to exhibit at NAB, and the booth space, since it's been going for 100 years, there's seniority involved, and the vendors, the big vendors, the major camera manufacturers, the Sonys, the Panasonics, the Avids, those people that have been in there and had show floor space for a number of years get priority in choosing their booth space and maintaining their position within a certain hall. The fact that they've now done this kind of a fruit basket turnover by eliminating the South Hall, which had a large number of vendors in it, and adding the West Hall, priorities, space organization has all changed, and those premiums that they get for a good placement in the hall have all changed. And so I'm not sure the vendors are willing to pay the big bucks now that their original booth space has disappeared from the show, and they're looking at, maybe we can just do an online version and reach a lot more eyeballs that way, since people aren't going to be able to find us because the hall where we used to always exhibit is gone now. It's not included in the mix. So I think that may play a large may determine whether the upswing is going to happen or whether it's going to level off and move more back to the web.
Chris?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. It used to be South floor lower. You'd walk in, boom, Black Magic. And Black Magic was in the North Hall, which used to be just all radio, if you remember. Courtney
Absolutely.
Does. And you walk in and it's like Black Magic and Ross were right inside the door in the North Hall. And I was like, I can't even imagine how many meetings had to take place to get these people to give up that seniority that you're talking about. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go on to the next question. We got two more to knock out, then we'll get on to our vertical today.
Coming in from Sam Greenwood in Toronto, he says, what are the good or important certs to get a start in the AV industry?
John Preto?
As everything moves over to IP, which is good for me because I've been networking for 30 years, is the Cisco designations are super strong, and I think they would be helpful in the AV industry. The Dante ones are pretty good because you learn a lot and they're free. So you might as well knock those out. They only take about a week to get those. What else am I forgetting, guys? There's some others.
Marty?
Avixa. Avixa runs quite a number of different training programs and certification programs. So when we're talking AV industry, we often think about business meeting production or even installation engineering. So Avixa is really good for that. They talk about the technology, how to put it together. They talk about networking. They talk about audio. They talk about video and projection and screens, flat screens, how to erect them, how to configure them, and how to operate, and do production work as well as installation. So Avixa is another one. I agree. Dante for generalized networking as well as specific Dante-oriented networking. And what was the other one you mentioned, Pedo?
Cisco.
Oh, yeah. Cisco also for networking, sure.
And these things are all very much a bonus for you. I will say, though, that we talk a lot about the soft skills. What's really going to get you hired is not your certs, which are nice, but it's your ability to work on a crew or impress people when you walk through the door. Learn how to be how to put out a professional presence. Learn in meetings the social cues of when to step up and put your opinion in, and when to hold back and let the people who are more senior to you do the talking. Everybody wants somebody on the crew who, at the end of the shoot, the CEO comes up to you and goes, he or she, they were really, I enjoyed having them around when I interacted with them. If you get that kind of feedback on your crew people, you made a really good decision. And so your social skills and the soft skills of the industry, I think, are every bit as important as the certifications and your technical qualifications. So pay attention to that stuff. Let's go to the next question.
Next, from Douglas Carmichael, who says, do you think we'll see the lower level constellation switchers, 1 or 2 MEs, upgraded to 4K?
Courtney?
We will, but they'll be new switchers. The first they just introduced at NAB this year is the first start is the routing switchers are going to be first. So you have to have routing switchers to handle the stuff that's going to go into those constellations probably. So the 10 input, the 20 input, and the 40 input have all now become 12 gigabit input SDI so that they can handle 4K switching now on the routing switchers. And I think Grant mentioned that they're moving 4K to the constellations next. I think I heard him say that in the video, but they've been experimenting with it in-house and they're working out the bugs in that. But it will be new pieces of hardware. You won't see it. The current hardware doesn't support that high frequency input on the SDI, so they'll have to switch it out with all new switchers that are 4K rated.
All righty. So we've hit, thank you all for your patience. I know that we're starting a little late on the post NAB discussion of specifically audio, but we are there now. We've handled all our other questions, and there was a lot of audio at NAB, as there has been since the early days. Really, radio was one of the earliest technologies that NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters, started with well before television was a big deal. So audio has been a major focus of the National Association of Broadcasters show since day one. And there was plenty of audio. Obviously, the industry is going through the continued and epidemic digitization of everything having to do with audio signals. We're seeing less and less analog stuff. I mean, there's still some microphones and stuff like that work that way. And in fact, professional balanced audio is still a major player out there in the field, even if it's the analog versions of those. But it's clear that everything is being digitized. And I think I saw that reflected in the show in the coverage that we did on Monday and Tuesday live from the show floor. There's just a lot of audio vendors and a lot of energy and excitement in that space. So does anybody on the panel want to just start out with an overview of what you saw at NAB this year and what impressed you? And I'm looking kind of at you, Marty, because you're one of our audio gurus here on the show. Preto raised his hand before you did, though. So I'm going to go ahead and go to John
Marty
first.
can go first. He's the expert. I'm just a schlop.
Whoever wants to go in. I'm just saying for the back end crew who might want to do a super source and put you on screen without a hand, they're not quite sure what's going on. Yes, Chris is pointing to it now with AI. We should have AI'd you in. Let's start with Marty, because Marty, you're our longtime audio guru. Go for it.
Well, I'd be happy to kick off the conversation. Thank you,
Great.
Bill. So there was more than I expected to see in the way of new product at NAB this year for audio production and editing. First, we saw from Blackmagic a lot of announcements. And there were upgrades to both the hardware and the software. There were a number of interesting upgrades to DaVinci Resolve in terms of audio production, including text-based editing. And text speech to text, so that you can take a video clip and it would transcribe that to text, and then you can edit your video from there, or at least start to edit your video from there. There was a bunch of announcements from companies like Sound Devices and Zaxcom and Rode and Sennheiser on a variety of different fronts for audio. So one of the most interesting things is Sennheiser's new technology, which is still under development. It's in beta testing now. And this is applicable for larger events and larger shows, where they are taking what traditionally now is like every wireless device, microphones, in-ear monitors, IFBs, comms, all of those devices, which each need their own frequency, and consolidating them and multiplexing them into one Ethernet equivalent broadband spectrum. So like there are a bunch of technologies where we can take multiple channels of audio and convert them and put them into an Ethernet system, right? We can like Dante, Ravenna, AVB, and even NDI can also put multiple channels of audio onto the Ethernet. So if for networking, well, what we don't have is a way to reliably send those over a wireless platform between devices. So like, we can do that. We can do standard data transmission using Wi-Fi, but Wi-Fi is just was never designed and not suitable for communicating multiple channels of audio. So that's what Sennheiser seems to be developing right now is that connection. What we saw from Sound Devices with their new A20 wireless system, their new microphones, was pretty remarkable. They not only have they improved the quality of the microphones and the build of the transmitters and receivers. They've been able to take like 16 channels of audio, put them in a single rack unit that can be mounted with modular receivers. They are software driven, and they can be tuned all the way up to 1.5 gigahertz, right? Which is a huge spectrum for a single wireless receiver to be able to tune to. And with the software control from the receiver over all of the transmitters. So from the receiver base through either the front panel control, which are video screens, touch panel video screens, or from laptop computer control, you can you can control the transmitters live. You can change the audio gain. You can change filtering. You can change the channel. You can mute and unmute. And when you're setting up channels for each of these transmitters at the beginning of a show, or even in the middle of the show, if you find that some channels are being interfered with, you can take a block of those and instantly move them to another part of the spectrum. I mean, you can do a group of these all at once, and it takes like seconds, which is pretty remarkable. The demo that they had on the show floor, and even you can see some of this on their website, was pretty remarkable. So let's see. There was also a number of upgrades to lower cost wireless microphones, such as the Rhodes and others. These are pretty remarkable because they're small wireless transmitters and receivers, and they are generally working in the 2.4 gigahertz space, which brings the cost down. And some of them are capable of 2 transmitters for a single receiver, which brings the cost down even further. And they're good for lower cost production where reliability is not front of mind or not required. You don't want. I wouldn't use these on a live broadcast show, but if you're doing recordings, for later production, sure, why not? So these are just some of the things that I saw, and there were some others as well. But I'll let somebody else add some of their observations and maybe add some to that.
Absolutely. John Prado, what did you see?
Marty said it all. We've been streaming since 1997, and every time we try to do audio, it doesn't work right. So we hire guys like Marty and Greg Bullock. That's the lesson. Hire a good A1.
Yeah, it can be really complicated. If you don't work in audio all the time, there are a lot of pitfalls and a lot of signal to noise ratio killers that can sneak in your way. Courtney, your thoughts?
Well, I was remarking about we were talking about the North Hall earlier being mainly radio engineering equipment, and you'd find some mixers, radio mixers, and cart machines in the old days, and tape decks, things like that. But now, since we've moved into the digital world, I think broadcasting, remember it is, NAB stands for National Association of Broadcasters. So these are radio and television stations that are broadcasting out there. And this convention was designed for equipment for those specific people. The audio acquisition and music mixing, that kind of stuff shows up more at NAMM. You'll see more of the high-end music capture and mixing consoles there, although you will see some broadcast consoles at NAB, and I'm wondering just how many of them are left there to demo those consoles that are found in broadcast booths and master control rooms and so on, because everything is becoming computerized, especially radio stations these days. You can run a radio station off your laptop with no external hardware, just a connection up to the transmitter, a digital connection up to the transmitter, and the right software, and you hit go with one button, and that's it. It plays out all the tunes, or all stored as WAV files or MP3 files. All the commercials are automatically scheduled and slotted in, and it even has ways of triggering local commercials in different areas in your broadcast area. So it's all automated and all digital these days. So analog equipment doesn't really mean much anymore. So I think there's been a consolidation in the radio broadcast era. Pretty much gone, other than talk radio, pretty much gone in music radio is the DJ that's spinning discs or playing tapes or inserting carts and playing back commercials according to his, and logging those commercials, because that's always an important part of broadcasting. That's all handled by a computer these days. And I was going to comment on the wireless the wireless receivers, which we see a lot of at new things at the show this year. Since we moved to digital, wireless transmission used to always be a problem in analog days, because you had to you were assigned a very small band of frequencies you could operate in, and there was always interference in those bands because they were the television broadcast bands. And so your transmitters had to be very careful, and the front end of your receivers had to be very carefully tuned to reject spurious noise from outside that band. Well, these days with digital transmission, the receiver, as Marty was mentioning, these new A20 receivers just suck in a whole broad area of bandwidth all at once and store it in memory and decode the different frequencies along it that the wireless transmitters are transmitting and send those data streams out into individual outputs for each channel. So that since they're capturing a broad swath and not having to tune to a specific frequency for each transmitter, they're capturing them all at once. They can do things like just change the firmware or open up licensing. That's how that A20 is scheduled. You know, it receives 4, 8, or 12 or 16 channels, one receiver. You know, a pair of antennas. So it's got diversity receivers. It's got 2 receivers in there to help get rid of the multipath cancellation in receiving those bands. And they just open up different channels based on how much you want to pay on that output. And it all goes out over Ethernet, over a Dante card, or over a multi-pin connector to give you analog outputs. So it's a lot easier these days to maintain with these digital receivers. So that's a main paradigm shift in the world of wireless microphones. I think the main problem we're facing today more and more, once we've transitioned into digital in the audio world, is lip sync with video. And that has become a huge problem, trying to keep things in sync with our different digital audio streams and video streams that are undergoing different compression and different paths through the broadcast hardware. Keeping everything in sync has become a major nightmare. And once we conquer that, then we'll know we've succeeded.
That never affects me, Marty. I'm laughing about.
He said 2 seconds after we saw it.
2 seconds after you saw me say it, Marty.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, lip sync and wireless reliability. Even some advancements in microphones. So this morning I saw that the NAB's Product of the Year Awards list came out, and that included a few companies that I had not heard of before. So new entries into the space, and one of them was a company called Dotterell Technologies. Now, this is a company that came up with a very unique product. I'm just trying to find the right website that I can show you. So they have a product called Konos, Konos. Now, this is something for field production. This is a device that looks like a shotgun microphone. Give me just a second here. That with a control box. Now, this is a device that has 80 elements in this microphone with adjustable directivity and rear channels. So it is using real-time noise filtering to capture clear sound in challenging sonic conditions. And so, yeah, it's a little rectangular microphone. I mean, when I say little, there's a photograph here. There you go. So somebody is hand holding this microphone, fairly small device. And what it's doing is it has selectable polar patterns with multiple different outputs. So there is, here you go. So narrow, medium, and wide output. And it's got forward pickup pattern and surround or rear pickup pattern. So you've got primary audio and you've got atmospheric or ambient audio coming out of different outputs that you can then mix together. So this was a real interesting product. Another one is Sennheiser's. Again, now this is also in the lower cost realm for wireless microphones. They've had their digital EW product line out for about a year. Now they have the EWDP, which is a lower cost wireless microphone system. looks like $700 for a transmitter receiver set with a lavalier microphone, retail, and it's using the television spectrum, so it's not 2.4 gigahertz, and has some interesting features to it. A little bit of prompting for problem resolving, so it gives you feedback, and you can monitor and control this over over an app that's available for Android and iOS. So it's a Bluetooth communication with the transmitter and receiver. So it gives you frequency coordination, and it gives you control. So this is a real interesting thing. Some other really interesting product came out of a company called Deity Microphones, who have their own wireless product that are also working in the television spectrum, not 2.4, small wireless transmitters and receivers, in the lower cost spectrum, but they're also doing double-ended recorders. So it's a small unit that is a recorder, not a transmitter. You can put in somebody's pocket with a lavalier or a head-worn microphone, and they can be moving around and not worrying about wireless spectrum. They can just be recording. They also do mixers and timecode gear, and have microphones and power distribution for portable work setup. So they came up with a bunch of new things too.
Hey, Marty, I didn't realize it, but we had only a few questions when I looked at the top of the hour. We are now flooded with them. We've got 14 questions ahead of us, and we're in the last 20 minutes of the show. So I want to get as many audience questions as possible. So, Courtney, could you sneak us into the next one? I know you had something else to say. If you had a quick comment, make it, but then let's get to our audience questions.
Yeah, I was just going to point out that that Deity Pocket Recorder is one of the few. There's a number of other manufacturers that have had out those small pocket recorders that connect up to a lavalier and record high quality audio in your pocket. But this is one of the first ones that incorporates timecode. So it interfaces with their Deity timecode generator. So it can jam sync to the timecode so that you have a common timecode reference over that pocket recorder so that you can synchronize it back to your camera later. So let's move on to the next question. Paul Wallace says, what is your own personal audio best of show at NAB?
Preto raised his hand first. John, what did you see?
You know, Rode did a good job at this announcement where they announced these 6 or 7 products, whatever it is, but the integration of the Wireless Go product into those mixers, into the RødeCaster Pro, and I think also the Duo made a lot of sense for me. I get lots of calls from people that have small podcasting stations, and they're looking for solutions exactly like this.
Yeah, those inexpensive units. Chris spoke highly of them. I think I run into a lot of circumstances where my little old Sennheiser AVX system, it's not the Electrosonics that I used to carry around, but in the right circumstances, those things can be very valuable. Chris?
I'd go one step further in the, excuse me, Rode world. It'd be great if you could, sorry about that. I coughed, and then I watched myself on the delay cough again. I was like, wow, I really need to apologize. It'd be great if they had like wireless monitoring as well. Like even if like Bluetooth monitoring.
Interesting.
You know, I would love that.
Yeah, if they can get the latency down so you're not driving yourself nuts with the return. Let's go on to the next question. We got so many of them here. I want to get as many as possible in. Oops, I caught Courtney unawares.
Sorry, I was having to deal with my office phone ringing right in the middle of that. Dennis Wojtek from New Kensington says, anyone watching last night's Alex experiment in HDR 5.1? I found it fascinating switching between the iPad and iPhone with iPods. I would prefer a lower level of rear sound.
Yeah, this is one of Alex's experiments. I was hopped into that a little bit. I think many of us who were on the panel at the end paid some attention to that. It was really interesting. That is why we are so lucky. You know, we are doing this as a volunteer effort. No one is paying for it. So we get to experiment with things that we might not otherwise. And, you know, 5.1, recording in a field and doing a trade show revealed some things that I hadn't thought about. For example, at one point, I think think Javier was on the left side of Alex. And then as they moved between two things, he moved to the right side. And the fact that they were doing 5.1 and they had Alex pan to one side and Alex pan to the other side meant that they got off axis in the stereo feed, and visually the person on the left was audio wise on the right. And it was like, hey, these are things we haven't had to think about. Now that we've got 360-degree sound field, suddenly these things are another aspect of production we have to pay attention to. Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, if you're going to use a stereo 5.1 mapping to go with video, you got to remember that if people are listening on headphones, they can have their headphones on backwards. They can have the left one in the right ear and the right one in the left ear, and it's going to really confuse them. It's what happened to you, Bill? So
yeah, and what's the ambience level need to be? Do I want to have it compete? Do I need to keep the center
that's the other
channel
thing
clear? There's so
is
many options.
At a convention, you want to try. It's hard enough to hear the person that's talking to you without having to mix in to tune out all the ambient stuff that's going on around you that you're not trying to listen to. So I think it's kind of difficult to use in a situation like we're using it in a convention center. It may make more sense in something like a dramatic presentation or a film, or watching a film or a stage play or something where you want to tie the positional audio to what you're seeing on screen. But if you're in a documentary situation where you're trying to focus on one person, it doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, it was interesting. Theater and around, somebody's going to do something really exciting by positioning things around you, or maybe a mystery where the bad guy's car leaves behind you when you're in the mid. There's all sorts of possibilities for this to be positive, but I think we're in early days, and that's why it's exciting to be doing these experiments. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, by the way, I just saw Renfield in Atmos. A lot of bats flying around all over the theater. Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana says, last year at NAB, TV tech saw object-based audio like Dolby Atmos as a trend to watch. And as it has been 11 years since it was brought into theaters, it was Walt Disney's Brave as the first one. Where are we with OBA, or object-based audio, in the home and in the broadcast industry?
And no one has said anything. Nobody's raised a hand on this one. Dolby Atmos. Oh, John Preto, thank you.
So Douglas posted the tech write-up on the Sphere, the Madison Square Garden Sphere here. They've got object-oriented system here. They've got like 1,600 speakers in this thing going in. It's a really good read. I don't know how to find that article again, but Douglas, maybe you can post it someplace. But Roscoe, you should read that article about object-based audio. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. TV technology I've read for decades. That was one of the things I think I found it at NAB, and I was just looking at their best of show. They have a whole list of the technologies they saw that they thought were coming trends. So worth a look to track that down. Let's go on to the next question.
Next one comes in from Guy Cochran in Seattle, who was on the show floor. Money, no object. What would provide the lowest latency to on-air talent for a real-time conversation? The delay with Unity comms bit us a few times.
Yeah, we did have a couple of little issues with Unity. I among others, had some trouble hearing things that was very weird. But listen, again, this is not supported by a billionaire. And we're doing amazing work with very thin resources often. I mean, it's not that there are no resources. There's been a lot of money tossed into this, and a huge value in volunteer time from very, very smart people. But things don't always work perfectly when you can't just throw money at solving problems. So it's been interesting. Marty, what are your thoughts on money, no object, on-air talent stuff?
Well, we are all subject to the limitations of wireless spectrum and Wi-Fi and cellular connections. So, if money was no object, I would put up my own cell phone tower right outside the conference hall and make sure that I'm the only one who knows how to use it.
All right.
But,
Courtney? I'm just trying to keep things moving as fast as we can because we still have 14 questions, and this is my fault. I should have paid more attention to how many were coming in on the last part of this. Courtney, go ahead.
Yeah, in the analog days, we didn't have to worry about latency because it was always instantaneous. But these days, since everything's going over the network, especially for comms, we're bringing in people remotely, and those network packets don't always travel the same path each time. Sometimes they fall off into the Grand Canyon somewhere and get lost before they come back out. So I was thinking maybe using a VPN, a tunneling VPN, as a connection between our head end and the people in the field would eliminate some of that unknown latency that can crop up with packet loss and retransmission. The things that happen with HTTP transmission of audio packets might help somewhat.
Cool idea. We do have the Friday show, and I wanted to make sure everybody knew about this. We're going to be doing the breakdown of the NAB coverage on Friday here on the show, so stay tuned for that. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Jesse Mills in San Francisco in the Bay Area. Did anyone put their hands on the new little Yamaha console? If so, how was the build?
Chris, did you touch it?
You know what, Marty? Jesse, rather, I walked by it. I went, oh, there's the new Yamaha console. And I think in my mind, it was like, oh, it's Yamaha. It's probably pretty good. I didn't actually touch it. When I read that, I was like, oh yeah, I probably should have. It's sexy though. Looks really nice.
Next question.
Peter Moore comes in from Auckland, New Zealand, and he asks, will there be a lessons learned office hours from both NAMM and NAB coverage?
Well, NAB specific, yes, and it's day after tomorrow on Friday. We're doing our video breakdown tomorrow on my show, and then we're going to be Friday talking about everything we learned. All the crews should be back in, so we should have a big day then. Next question.
Next question comes in from Andrew Lipnick in San Francisco. He says, Audinate announced Dante Connect, allowing Dante audio to traverse the web with low latency. What do you think are the good use cases for this new format?
I don't think that anybody who works with audio don't see the words low latency and go, yes, please, more. I want low latency down to 0 milliseconds if I can possibly get it. I don't think physics will ever allow that, but I know everybody's excited about it. So, use cases probably everywhere unless it's terribly expensive. Courtney, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're doing. There's probably QoS tagging of these packets to give them priority as it flies over the internet. That may be how they're achieving their low latency. I haven't laid hands on it, so don't know how good it is. We'll have to see.
All right, next question.
Coming in from another one from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand, says, way back when we had the lithograph camera obscura et al. Using various photographic exposure techniques, what would be the audio equivalent, or what would the audio equivalent be?
Yeah, probably high dynamic range. I mean, that's giving us more signal to noise ratio, more room for more bandwidth. And I would think that as we move into high def, that'll be helpful. Courtney, real quick.
Now, if you go to the way back, there was parabolic discs for microphones listening at a distance for your camera obscura. There are analog methods of sucking in audio from far away. I remember shotgun microphones that were made up of 20 or 30 different aluminum tubes, each tube cut to a different link and bundled together into a long shotgun-like thing. And that's how shotgun microphones came about. So yeah, there were actually acoustical ways of amplifying audio and collecting it.
And maybe that square shotgun that Marty just showed us will have, maybe we'll find out that is a path toward this. Let's go to the next question.
Next question comes in from Jack Carson in Phoenix, Arizona. What are the panelists' thoughts on the RødeCaster Duo? Is it a good option for field interviews?
John Preto.
If they're next to your Duo and you've got the Rode Go 2s next to it, then I think that makes sense. But walking around, it's not going to work for that, right?
Courtney?
Yeah, no, and I think they went the wrong direction. I like my RødeCaster Pro II, but I'd like more inputs, please, not less inputs. So the nice thing is they put all that effects stuff that I never use into the mic preamps in the new RødeCaster Duo. So at least you have two high quality inputs. But a lot of, if you're going to go into podcasting, a lot of times you have more than one guest besides yourself. So Duo is too few inputs. You want to have a place to bring in stereo inputs or other inputs as well over the internet, your laptop, etc. And I'd like to see them go with more inputs, not less.
Next question.
From Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Another TV tech trend to watch for from 2022 was personalization of audio, as in multiple languages or 5.1 stems that the user can mix at home. Was there anything in this year's show that confirms this trend or advances this personalization of audio?
I didn't see anything specifically that we covered that I watched in the coverage from NAB. I will say that multiple language delivery is a pretty robust technology out there. Courtney, did you see anything or hear about anything?
The DaVinci Resolve and some of the editorial packages are now boasting, of course, audio to text conversion and translation. So they can now translate that automatically and put it on the timeline for subtitles in any of your projects. So that's one way of personalizing the audio, where you can choose a different translation because it comes in as metadata when you're watching something. You can change your closed captions to any language you want, and they can have 10 or 20 languages included there.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. I use Simon Says a lot to do listen to the audio and turn it into text for me. And I was shocked the first time I did it when I could pick not only English as the language to translate that audio conversion into, but probably 35 other languages. Probably like the English, though, even at 99.9% accuracy, that means it's going to get 1 out of 100 words wrong potentially. So you always had to go back and check manually. So I love this kind of automation. It really makes our lives easier, but I would not rely on it for the level of production detail that I always want to get. We'll see what happens. There's a lot of effort there. Let's go to the next question.
If you've ever watched real-time captioning from a stenographer typing it in a live show, you know that they make a lot more mistakes than the AI.
There you go. All right.
Douglas Carmichael says, LAWO, an old school broadcast vendor, has announced NDI support for their home management platform. Do you see a use for NDI even in higher budget settings where 2110 is dominant? And he has a link there.
Marty?
So LAWO is a company that makes large audio consoles for remote production. They are often used in remote video production trucks. They're also used in broadcast studios. And so they, back in 2016, they started embracing support for remote production, where the equipment would go on site, but the people would be elsewhere that run the equipment. And so they seem to be embracing, adding support for NDI for productions where ST2110 equipment may not be included in the suite, or the infrastructure for 2110 may not be available or included. So, for a lot of productions that, for cost reasons or equipment availability, may rely more on NDI than 2110, this makes just the number of different platforms and communications protocols that are compatible with their equipment, expanded.
Absolutely excellent. Let's go to the next question.
This one comes from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. He says, the new wireless mics look amazing, many with a huge range of frequency selection, assuming for worldwide use. How do they keep U.S. users away from the now illegal bands sold off in recent years?
Courtney, do you have any old band radio mics?
Here's how they do it. They use GPS chips. Since GPS chips have been incorporated in all phones out there, they build them into the receivers so they know your exact location, longitude and latitude, and will only unlock the legal frequencies of where you happen to be. So they won't let you get outside the fence, wander outside the fence, and it's fenced in via GPS. I suppose you could cover it up with tinfoil to try and cover up the GPS antennas, or if you're inside, you may not be able to get a good location, but it may force you to enter your zip code or something before it unlocks the frequencies for the audio reception.
I only got snapped once. I had a a VHF system, Sony 810s. It was pretty expensive, $1,200 or $1,500, something like that back in the old days. And when they sold off the Spectrum, they sold off my part of the Spectrum with it, and it drove me crazy for a while. Oh, well, times move on. Next question.
Next one comes from Guy Cochran, who was at the show and is from Seattle. He says, thoughts on the AI SDI dialogue cleaner. And he has a link there to linkstechnic.com.
That's another thing where there's just a ton of work going on. And I understand a little about this because I do a lot of voiceover work. And so dialogue cleaning, particularly field dialogue, where you might be recording it in difficult conditions, and whether it's machine learning or AI-ish kind of things, to look at a signal and determine what is signal and what is noise and extract one from the other seems to be coming. There's a lot of effort in these areas. And Courtney, your thoughts?
Oh, what was the company we just had on about a week ago? Brain fade. That does the transcription, the automated transcription.
Descript.
Descript.
Oh, Descript,
thank you.
yeah.
It has tools in it for eliminating ums and uhs and ers and uhs and cleaning up the dialogue. Maybe it's similar to what this linkstechnic.com is doing. The problem with all of that is to remove it from the video. If you're going to cut out an and an ah and the person's on camera, you got to cut away to something. Otherwise, you're going to see jump cuts. So I'm not sure exactly how they're doing that and keeping it in sync. That'd be interesting to look at.
We have that problem as video editors. I know Chris has dealt with the same thing I have. You get a little short thing, you have to cut it out. You get a little jump cut.
Nobody cares anymore.
Yeah,
it's 2023.
There are transitions that help you get across that, but you're right. The MTV look is if everybody's jerking.
But in all reality, yeah, just cut it out, and then I'm gonna have to lather it up with some B-roll anyway. So it's it's likely not a big deal.
Yeah, that's the tradition. Cutaway shot. You always want cutaway shots. If they don't see it, they won't notice it. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Tromsø, Norway. Ronnie Hofsey says, is Cinamaker able to do automatic switching based on different audio input channels? If so, how many audio inputs can it handle? And can it ingest Dante audio?
We didn't have anybody raise a hand on this. Cinamaker did do one of the panels that Alex and our friend from Zoom, Andy Carluccio, was on. I saw a little piece of that in After Hours. And so look for those. I would imagine some of those things might end up being accessible. That was something I think done by Future Media Concepts at NAB, and sometimes that content gets out in the wild. So if you can find Andy and Alex Lindsay's seminar from NAB, you'll hear some stuff about Cinamaker, and it was pretty in-depth and pretty interesting. I'm going to run over a little bit. I was trying to end on time. I tried to, but I made such a tactical error not getting to this stuff because I saw so few questions that this is my fault, and I'm going to go over so we can get as many of your questions in as possible. So pardon me for that, and we'll try to keep it short. Let's get to the next question.
Okay, coming in from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. He says, old timers of NAB, like me, remember the radio hall. Does the lack of such a focused area benefit, detract, or is it a non-issue for today's audio companies?
You know, audio is integrated into so much of what we do that you can't really escape audio no matter what side. You know, yes, I understand there was a huge separate hall for it, but audio is now in the computer sections, it's in the video sections, it's in the dedicated audio sections, it's in podcasting sections. There's just, audio is so important to any communication, no matter what medium you're using to capture it or transmit it, that I don't think audio is ever going away. Marty, your thoughts?
Yeah, although there's no more radio hall, there are sections, the different buildings, and they were subdivided into broad areas of interest. So there was a delivery section in the West Hall, I think it was, that included a lot of radio companies for transmitters and studios and radio production software and stuff like that. They were grouped. You could find them.
Okay, John Preto, real quick.
As an really old timer, I remember Comdex, and guess what? It's completely gone now. And so I'm a huge proponent of everything going digital first.
Courtney?
Yeah, with almost all radio software that does playouts of music, sports, sound, etc., going to software-based, you can try it out by just downloading a demo copy of it and running it on your computer at home to try it out. So you don't need to see it in the flesh at a convention center. So the only ones left there for the broadcast are the transmitter people.
We have 3 more questions to touch on, and my apologies to the back end crew. I know everybody's a volunteer back there, and lots of people back there. And my goal is to try to get you out on time every day, but we're going to do our best to quickly knock these out. Next question.
This one from Jack Rappel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Says, any evidence of a content creator shotgun mic in the sub $125 range at the show?
Marty, did you see anything? Did the Deity booth have a little shotgun? They were doing a lot of good stuff, but
Deity showed has a couple of shotgun microphones, but they start at $300.
Okay.
I was just looking to see if there's what's on like mono price. My impression for that price point is going to be like a low-end shotgun microphone that's short enough to be put on a camera, but not long enough to be useful in on a boom pole or handheld situation. It's just not enough money for it. There's a lot of technology that goes into building a good shotgun microphone that's going to be highly directional.
Absolutely. Let's go to the next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, he says a new firmware update will also soon be released for the RødeCaster Pro II, which I'm speaking to you now on, which unlocks an incredible hidden feature, the wireless microphone connectivity.
That's interesting. So you think it's built in. Courtney, did you see that?
I haven't tried it. I haven't gotten it yet. I think it's still in beta. They haven't released. I don't think it'll come out to June. The problem with that is I think what they're doing there, this is just a guess because I haven't seen it yet. It only works with their Rode Go microphones, which are 2.4 gigahertz, which is the same frequency as Bluetooth and Bluetooth LE, which there is a Bluetooth receiver built into all the RødeCaster Pro IIs. So you can use audio in, and it comes in on a separate channel already on the RødeCaster 2. So I think they're just retuning that the Bluetooth receiver to be to talk to and receive from the Rode Go microphone. So I don't think it'll be anything really new other than the fact that you can add one wireless mic channel to your RødeCaster Pro. But I bet you anything when it comes out, you're going to lose your Bluetooth connectivity for connecting your phone. The Bluetooth was designed to bring a phone caller, let's say, in to converse with them two-way direction over Bluetooth. And I bet that's going to disappear if you use the wireless receiver for your wireless Go receiver.
All right, let's go to our last question.
From Douglas Carmichael, he says the L'acoustic Mixhalo partnership announcement. They mentioned delivering audio streams to users via 5G cellular networks and not just in-venue Wi-Fi. Wouldn't relying on a congested cellular network run the risk of audio latency issues?
Marty, your thoughts?
Well, when you have, 5,000, 10,000 people in an arena, configuring a Wi-Fi network to support all of those simultaneous users is nigh on impossible, I think. It would take a huge amount of infrastructure, and because every Wi-Fi access point radio is only capable of serving a certain number of simultaneous users, and with only so much bandwidth to go around. On the other hand, 5G networks are built to handle tons and tons and tons of simultaneous users. And so, unless a tour wanted to travel with all of this networking gear, which would be enormously expensive and require lots and lots of frequency coordination so as not to interfere with the Wi-Fi that's already in the venue that staff are using, utilizing the cellular network actually makes a lot of sense from both a cost perspective and the ability to support that many users.
Courtney, quick last comment.
Yeah, 5G, especially millimeter wave 5G, is more bandwidth, so more data faster. more data faster means less audio latency. So the more you can push out, the more data you can squeeze down that pipe faster, the more people, receivers you can hit with less latency. So, yeah.
Nice. Thank you. And JJ, you're in the panel. I haven't seen you in a long time. Good to see you. You're just hanging in there. Thank you all for listening. We really appreciate it. Tlaloc Traversal today, 102,528 miles. That's 165,002 kilometers. If you were to take bananas and lay them end to end and to each of the persons who involved in the show today, that would be 812 billion bananas for scale, from 4.1 times around the earth. We want to thank all of the producers, all of the panelists, the crew and back end folks, everybody doing fabulous work every single day here. If you want to continue the conversation, it happens in after hours, and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching and listening.
This is where we sing Happy Trails.
We do.
Till we meet again.
JJ, it's so nice to see you. We don't see your appearance in the panel very much.
Sneaking in on us. Does look like you're growing antlers, though.
Oh, yeah, your background. Thanks, everybody, for being here. See y'all tomorrow. Tomorrow, it's video day.